What album should I talk about today? Maybe an album that's played on a flute? Or that's sung by a guy that's mute but also wearing a suit? Maybe a record by Jafar, where he blows into the exhaust pipe of a car. Actually, I think I should cover On Guitar. That's about on par. What's peepin', what's creepin', Dingle Nation? It's your lovely host Dingleton here with another new video. This video is a pretty special one, as this is the final installment of the Japanese Jazz January. It's been really fun launching this entire channel and doing this little mini-series, getting the chance to talk about records which I usually wouldn't get the chance to talk about. So let's make this count. Let's wrap this up with another one of my favorite Japanese jazz records, On Guitar by Masayoshi Takanaka. Now this was one of the first jazz albums that I really listened to after getting into jazz with Flying Beagle. Before even listening to it, I already knew from internet discourse and that one Ludwig clip that Takanaka is the goat of jazz, so I decided to educate myself. For which album I chose, it was mainly a question of which one I would stumble upon first. And I lucked out with this. I was planning on going back and listening to more of his discography. I even liked an upload of Rainbow Goblins on YouTube. But here I am, a year and a half later, and I still haven't listened to it. But this isn't Rainbow Goblins, silly. So let's get back on track with On Guitar. The first track, Breezin', opens up the record with a really soft and bubbly keyboard, along with, oddly enough, bongo drums. They don't stay for long though, as they make way for a sweeping, reverby guitar melody and incredibly varied percussion. With both a classic drum kit and some funky stuff like cowbells and even a guiro? You know, the frog you got to play in 3rd grade music class? Weird. Breezin' opens the door for silly, feel-good bangers, and the Blue Curacao walks right through. Even though the last song was called Breezin', this is the song that feels like a summery breeze. With its groovy bass lines, catchy guitar solos, and almost tropical production. I'm like 60% sure that the bridge on this track is played on one of those automatones. Which, like, why would someone do this on a jazz album? And why is it actually good? The midpoint of the track also has an excellent keyboard solo. And while it's not revolutionary, it fits so well on the track like a jigsaw falling into place. Ah, this is such a fun track, I love it. Also for those curious, I had to look this up, but Blue Curacao is a drink, which I'll probably be drinking soon. I remember the next track, Just the Way You Are, to be my favorite track during my first listen, and for good reason. The aforementioned silly banger door is still wide open, but this is the first track that I feel tries to express something more than just jamming. Takanaka personally oversees considerate bass lines and an introspective piano, supporting a talking guitar, which sure has a lot of stories to tell. But don't let that fool you, this track has its cake and eats it too. With frankly ridiculously funky choruses, maracas and goddamn goose honking. How he does it is beyond me, but this is an outstanding track that everyone needs to hear. The next track, Mambo Jumbo, ends off the A-side with a bang, sporting the fastest pace on the record. Takanaka is most famous for his guitars, which absolutely kill on here, with a great melody and outstanding solos. But I would dare to say that his less discussed piano absolutely steals the show on this track. This isn't a gentle piano sonata. Tanaka is here to style on us, he plays fast and he plays hard, pressing down on each key like an elephant. He also constantly shows off by teasing the listener and playing tricks on us. Oh yeah, the automatos are also back during the chorus, and I can't tell if they're goofy or majestic. At first I wasn't crazy about this track, but after studying the piano sections I have completely fallen in love with it. The B-side opens up with Samba Patti, a track that for all intents and purposes slams the door on the energetic silly cuts of the A-side and sets the mood for the rest of the LP. Instrumentally this is more of what we have already heard, but slower paced and more introspective. I would liken it to Just the Way You Are, but taken even further and without the honking knees. The wailing guitar and soul and bass line put in good work, and while this is a solid track, it lacks the fun quirkiness that really spoke to me during the A-side, a pattern that will sadly continue with the rest of the LP. I can only describe this as sunset music, which is fine in isolation, but covering this much Japanese jazz in a month has kind of fatigued me on it. The same can be said for the following track, Rainbow. unrelated to Rainbow Goblins. Apart from emotional guitar, the track also sports standout keyboard sections and an absolutely killer bass line, but vibe-wise it follows the same trends as the rest of the B-side. At least we get some nice tambourines on this track. Merry Christmas, y'all. The next song, That's the Way of the World, pushes the softer aesthetic even further. The entire track is built upon a slow and echoey guitar melody, which is pretty memorable, supported by a bass line that doesn't mess around, a punchy backing keyboard, and some of that unusual percussion we've seen on the album. I personally enjoyed this track. I love how atmospheric it is, but once again, this track would have stood out more if the previous two didn't fill the exact same role. Unfortunately, the final track, We're All Alone, doesn't end the album on any new note, but it does shake things up a bit. Throughout the entirety of the song, we get a classical sounding piano performance, and while it's not as crazy as the one on Mambo Jumbo, it still sounds grand. On this track we also get a touching guitar melody, as if it's slowly telling us how much it will miss us after we're done listening to this album. The bass that's been so exceptional the entire album takes an unexpected but still welcome backseat, not letting this great farewell turn into an overwhelming cacophony. This song feels like what they play at the end of a long-running sitcom. Everyone's packed their bag and said their farewell, and are now riding into their own sunset thinking about all the old. This makes for a great track, and probably my favorite one of the entire B-side of the album. It's tough rating a record like this, as the two halves of it are so different that you'd think that it's two different albums wearing a trench coat. The A-side is just non-stop fun and quirky jams, while the B-side is an introspective mood fest. This really hurts the consistency of the record, as the fun and quirky A-side is what makes it unique, and I would have preferred if maybe two of the B-side tracks got cut. But still, I gotta give this record its credit. With how quirky and creative the A-side is, this is undoubtedly a great record, and makes for one of Takanaka's most underrated listens. As for where it places on the Dingle list, it's not as consistent as Flying Beetle, and it's not as impressive as Scenery, but it is way more fun than Scenery, and it makes me feel good. So I think I'm gonna put it between Flying Beetle and Scenery. Now that the JJJ is over, I think I'm just gonna talk about a few random records which I recently heard, without any real theme. If you'd like to see that, you should totally subscribe. Also, I'm taking suggestions, so just comment an album you'd like to see me talk about. Either way, Dingleton out.